Hello, I'm Catherine, welcome to my studio. In today's video I'm going to show you how I've been filling up these 3 books that in another video I demonstrated how I made them. So they're quite simple structures. This one is just a simple sewn structure, and this one uses that same one stitch kind of pamphlet technique, but then I've stuck it into an old book cover, which was quite fun. And then this one is done in a different way with a wire system. So I'll link that video if you want to go back and see how I made these. But in today's video, I'm going to show you how I've been filling them with various different techniques. And I'm going to get my overhead camera and I'll do a flip through of all the pages and explain how I did some of the techniques, and there'll be film of me doing some of them. So these are my 3 books. I was going to tidy up, have a completely tidy table, put a nice clean piece of white paper on it, but I thought I would keep it real. This is what it's like when I'm doing these kind of things, because I use so many different things. I use bits of paper for collage, I use stencils, I have lots of different paints around. These are pigment dyes, these are watercolours, pencils, crayons, pastels, and just bits of paper everywhere. I do try and tidy up to a certain extent at the end of every day, but I don't always manage to do that. That's kind of the aim. Anyway, so these are my 3 books, and I'm going to start with this book. I decided to give this a circle theme. I just thought it would be fun because it's a square shape. Circles would work well on it. And so what I've done, I've collected papers together and then I've cut some circles out. This was done freehand, and this is one of my ammonites that I showed how to print in a video where I used Play-Doh as a medium, which is quite a fun way of doing it. So check that one out. And then inside, I've used another one of those. This is, I have a bit of a fascination with scientific instruments. So I cut this out of something I'd printed out from a museum site, I think. And I just liked the curve of that. This is some cyanotype paper. I might put something on there. So just to say, again, that these aren't, I might go back and work in them. Sometimes I think it's quite nice to have a few pages that don't have a lot of detail on. Books can look a bit too overworked if you fill up every square centimetre. So I don't really mind that. And then I cut these shapes out using something called a die cutter, and I'll show you here me using it on some different papers that I think are in the back end. And it's quite interesting, the die cutter. I think I'm going to make a separate video about them, about how you can use them creatively in your art, because they're often used for scrapbooking, which lots of people do that and it can be creative, but I think there's a bit of a sort of almost, you buy other people's art and you make shapes and put them all together and you don't have that much input. So I think I see everything as a tool that can be used to produce your art. And you buy these sort of metal, quite fine metal shapes, and they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. You have to kind of look through all the slightly naff ones to find interesting and just sort of simple. I've got a whole, if I'd been more prepared, I could show you. I've got a whole sort of concentric circles. I think they're about 5 altogether, and I've used them a lot. And it's very simple. I actually bought the die cutter first of all as a press, because that's what it is. It's just sort of 2 rollers that you put something through, so you can use it like a mini printing press. But then I started thinking, well, you can get all these dies. There must be a way of using them, using my own papers and art. So that's what I've been doing. And as I say, I think I'm going to do a video dedicated to using a die cutter creatively. So these first few pieces were cut out using this paper that I've had for so many years. You can see it's got sort of embroidery on it already in circles. So I like the fact we've got circles in the circles. And one of the nice things about using the die cutter is, as well as the positive shapes, you also get negative shapes. So you'll see this, I've repeated this a lot. I've used both the circles I've cut out and the voids with the circles in. And with these I use some Markle paint stick, and it's oil based, so anything oil based is going to react with anything water based. So I did a bit, I think I used a bit of gold and a bit of copper maybe, and I put it over the page as well, and then I did different washes over the top, and you get a very nice interesting textured effect. And then these are a couple of pages, as you can see, that I might go back in and put something in, I'm not sure. And this is actually an envelope because it's the same size, it's a square, and I've attached it with the flap there, and I just thought the colours went nicely with it. And I don't know whether I'll keep these in here. I did have these sort of artist cards that I'd started to do a bit of collage on, and because they're circles as well, but I think I'll work more on or put something else in there. But it's quite fun as a sort of element of surprise to have flaps and pockets on things. And then, so I'm using, as you can see, I'm repeating this circle motif. These were prints that I already had, and I liked how the colours blended in. So again, I've used the positive circle, and as you can see, that one got cut out of that one, but it gave a nice kind of composition, I think, putting those two together. And then I had some extra paper of this, which is jelly print. Didn't come out very well on a piece of calligraphy paper. And because I had extra, I cut out some circles and put those on the other side. I'm just kind of playing with these books. They're not supposed to be like a finished artwork, although they could be, but they're just a way of playing with ideas and shapes and colours, and sometimes that will inspire me onto sort of bigger projects, or you know, something that would then go on a wall. But you can use them how you like. This was a print, another sort of jelly print void that wasn't a particularly interesting one, so I've painted over that. And then I show you using my I have a lot of these thermofax screens that I make myself on my machine. I would do a dedicated video on these, only the material that you use with them is a little bit hard to find these days, but I could do a short video because you can send off for other people to make them for you. And they're made, what I do is I use actual plant material, so that's from a real fern. I take a photocopy of it, and then the photocopy goes through the machine with this special two-sided mesh, and then you end up with like a silk screen, but they're nice and flexible. So I used a few of these in all the books, and I just wanted to echo, you know, this bit isn't about circles. I'm not sticking to it religiously, or I think it would look a bit kind of mad. So sometimes one of the recurring things is if I've already got something on one side of the page, it just pleases me to echo it on the other side, either with colours, with forms, with shapes, and you can see it's sort of a reverse. So I've got the blue as the fern and a faint bit of orange around it to be a sort of counterpoint to that one. And then for this I used one of my, well actually I think I bought this to be a stencil before I had my die cutter, but then I realised it was because you can use it on the jelly plate, and I've used it a lot to make circle shapes, but it's slightly raised up there. So I took one of these pages of the book that I cannibalized for the next book I'm going to show you. I had quite a lot of these pages, and I put that through with this. So I put it through my die cutter with this, and I ended up with the positive, and they mostly stuck into the metal, which was quite good because it meant I could put the glue down, put them all down and get them pretty much in the right, so they're all pretty much horizontal. And then of course I wouldn't waste the negative side, so I put that on the other side. So again, it's a nice sort of echo, and I've used the Markle paint stick over them again. I think it was a copper one this time. And then you are supposed to wait for it to dry. I usually do. It takes 2 or 3 dries to days to sort of completely lose its sort of slight oily smell. But I have gone over them straight away, and you get the resist, which is why you've got that nice sort of speckledy texture. And that was using the same stencil, but using it on a jelly plate with some copper paint.
Found it really boring and really predictable, and I'm nothing against padding and twist, but I just think, where's the imagination for you?
And I decided, because there was so much going on with these pages, I decided to leave that one blank. And then this one, you'll see me doing this. I used a stencil and filled in some of the circles. I used a mixture of crayons. I think I used these children's crayons, which I quite like because they have a nice point, so they make it easy to do sort of finer work. And then, probably wasn't the best idea I had, I went over putting watercolour in because I just found it needed more colour, but I think there wasn't enough separation because it's just plastic. So some of the colours bled around the edge, but I don't really mind that. And then I used the same stencil on my jelly plate, and it's come out, I don't know why it's cracked. I think it's because it's very thin paper there. So that isn't completely successful, but you know, I'm just playing and enjoying myself. And that was onto graph paper. I might come back and do something in that one. I liked the idea of using the circles as a sort of to focus your attention. So I just chose this sort of crossroads in the middle of this map. Again, I might come back. What would be quite effective perhaps is to paint in or shade in the area around it. Not completely, everyone would be able to see it, but then that would highlight that bit in the middle. And then I glued this onto the other side. So that's more of the same paper that I used here. But that had been rolled over, I think. I don't know, I did that a while ago, but it was in my stash. And it echoed the colours on this side. And then this was just a print I already had, and I just thought it fitted in. It was a nice square shape, and I just like how the colours went with that because it was actually the same paint for that. And then this is using a really clear example of using the die cutter. So this was again one of these envelopes that I'd already printed on, and I put it through using several different sizes of the dies, and you can see that I've used the bit that I printed from as my frame. I've put some of the circles in and some opposite, and I quite like that page actually. And this is using, see how when I've got something it gets used in lots of different ways. So this is some more of this paper that I actually used to print from. So I used it on my jelly plate, printed it onto some tissue paper or some kind of tracing paper, and cut a circle out that side. So yes, this thing of circles within circles is quite appealing, I think. And then this was a print I already had, and I think I must have used that in it. As you can see, it fits it. It's sort of a quince or a pear sitting on a surface, and of course it fitted into my circles theme, so I thought, oh, I'll use that. And I put it next to this piece, and I thought if I paint a similar colour on that side, that will give it a nice kind of continuity. And then, so this is similar to what I did on the other side of the map at the front of the book. And this time I have just shaded in the outside, so it kind of makes the middle bits pop out a bit. So I think I will repeat it on that other one that I showed you at the beginning. And then here, as is obvious, I put this piece through the die cutter, cut out this circle, but then I actually stuck it onto the next page. So that's quite a nice little sort of, you're not quite expecting that, I think, when you look at it. And then for this, I used as one of my stamps that I've got with, let me Can I find it? Yes, there it is. Still got the ink on it. I've got these little foam stamps and I just kept moving that round just because that said sort of weather phenomena, and I thought that could look like something a bit weathery. I don't know, but it was fun. I enjoyed that. And I quite like when you get sort of accidental things because there was something else on the other side of that piece of print. I quite like that effect that's coming through there. And then, I don't know, I think this might be my favourite pages of the lot, actually. So this is one of the original pieces of from the other book of print about. And this was just so kind of serendipitous because I didn't deliberately pick a piece that said the moon on it and started talking about the moon. It just happened to. And I thought if I cut out a circle, and that was, see, if I'd really thought ahead, I would have cut out some of these shapes. If I knew it was going to be a circle book, I would have cut out some of these shapes before I'd actually made the book, but I hadn't thought that far ahead. So I did have to cut that one out by hand. And the easiest way to do that is you pierce a hole in the centre, go to the edge and go round. Obviously, you don't get quite as good a cut as you do with the cutters, but I don't really mind. It doesn't look as good. And so I've obviously taken that piece out and put that over there. And I like, yeah, as I say, that's probably my favourite page in the book. And then this is very similar to what I did with these two pages at the front of the book. And yeah, one thing I did realise is that getting this calligraphy paper wet, it gets very, very delicate. So I've had a little bit of a tear that I'll probably mend here and on the other side. But for this, I used, I think it was one of these Inktense blocks that I've got. And I have these and I have some of the pencils. What's good about them is that you can get quite precise with them. So obviously with the pencils, you can do lots of detail. And then if you wet them afterwards, they act more like paint and go more intense. So with this, I just I sort of ran the crayon over it and then added a little bit of water. And then this, very similar to the pages at the beginning, but I cut another hole out of that one, and that's rather a pleasing shape. You see, I might get ideas from some of the shapes I've made or the colour combinations or the patterns to perhaps some textile work. And that's always quite fun, trying to reproduce something you've done in your sketchbook into a different media. These two pages have still to have things put on them. I might, as I say, I don't want to overwork things. And then these are the pages that you saw me actually making with the circles in the die cutter. So again, it was a jelly plate with using the ammonite as a print into the Play-Doh, printing it onto this square. And then I've used all the different sort of sizes. Well, I've got one or two left over. And then the back of the book, that's, see, with that instrument, I cut that bit came from round that bit. And it's a compass really, but I think it did other things as well. And I think that sort of bookends the book nicely. And then another voided circle on the back. So that's my circle book. And this is the book that I made using an old book cover. So this is the clouds and weather phenomena that I used some of the pieces of paper. And I refer you back to my earlier video where I showed how to make this. But I think this is such a fun thing. You can, if you go to secondhand bookshops, ask if they've got any books that are too bad to actually put out on the shelves, because they probably just get pulped, and then you might get them for very little amount of money. And I then made a signature, which is just pages sewn together, and I stuck the first page and the last page in to make it into a book again. I reinforced the spine a bit. And this I decided to keep sort of very monochrome colours. So I think I've just used blacks and beiges and very dark blues, maybe a little bit of beige and copper, but nothing bright in this one. And I also wanted to have a sort of idea of seeing shapes through other shapes. So that's a recurring theme in that as well. And because I do a lot of printing with seed heads and sort of skeletal leaves, I think it has a slight wintry feel about it as well, which the colours play into. So these were both different jelly prints that I'd done. So that was onto tissue paper. I think that was onto the calligraphy paper. And then this is a mixture. I'm not sure this is completely successful. I put some tissue paper down which had a hand-drawn monoprint on it. Then I tried to jelly print straight into the book, and it's always quite difficult doing that because it's not like doing it on a nice flat piece of paper. You've got lumps and bumps, and some of it didn't come out very well. So I thought I'd cut out some of these prints and put them on top. I think they need to bed into the page a bit more, so I'm definitely going to go back to that page and do some more work in it. And then on this side, I had this print out of some seed heads, so I stuck that in, and then with the matte medium, I sort of glued around the edges because I don't like it when it looks, I think that's my problem with this, it looks too much stuck on. But if you use the glue or whatever, or even the sort of thicker paste, to try and sort of lose the edge, I think you get a more effective cohesive whole. I used another thermofax screen and I printed these shapes on there. And this was another jelly print I've just shown that in my autumn prints video. It was in that I had a few problems with the seeds coming out, but I filled in some of the gaps with pencil so that it all looks, you wouldn't know there'd been those holes. That was another monoprint onto tissue paper. And then this was one of my skeletal leaves that I collected last winter. I'm going to start doing that again this winter. And I put them in glycerin and that preserves them. I just think they're just so beautiful when you can see through them. And because that's one of the themes of the book, sort of looking through and seeing other layers underneath. And I glued that down with a matte medium, and that's kind of really protected now. I could do something more on that page, but I think actually I like it as it is. This was from, I think this was just, I can't even remember what this piece of paper was. To me, it looks like just putting paint strokes onto a plate of some sort and then printing them. It's so old, I can't remember. And I just put a slight wash of a pale colour over it to blend it in with this more sort of vintagey look on this side. And then this is a couple more of the jelly prints. That's one, as you can see, it's on tissue paper because it was very, very see-through. I really like that you can see the writing through there. And I printed that directly onto the page as a sort of counterpoint to that one. And then this is a bit different. This was the print that I already put in, and I sort of hummed and hawed, what could I put on this side that would kind of go? And in the end I thought I'm just going to recreate the snowdrop. So I went in and did some inking, and I used this pen that has you just fill it. It's a sort, so you can use watercolor in it, you can use ink in it, and it has a brush. And I hadn't used it for a while, and I think it was a bit heavy-handed on that one. When I came to do the one at the other end, I think I was holding it a bit more towards the end of the brush, and I got a sort of nicer feel. It's always a bit when you're putting prints into a book that you've already made, that feel, or even if you're making something especially to put into it, you've got a bit of freedom there because you know that, oh, if it doesn't come out very well, I don't have to use it. When you're going straight into a page in a book, that's it pretty much. Although I suppose I could have always collaged or painted over it if I hated it. But I wanted it to look sort of quite loose and sketchy, so I don't really mind that. And this is a sort of quite a nice watercolour paper, so it was nice to use that rather than to stick anything on it. And then this one, I found that I had another little sketch of snowdrops, so I thought that echoed that page. Again, I think I'm not terribly happy that that's not blending well in with that page, so I'll probably go back and maybe do some shading there or put a wash over there just so it looks more integrated into that side. And then I think this is one of my favourite pages in this book, although it's very simple. Just 2 prints that go together because the colours are the same. So this was a fern print done on my jelly plate. I think it was a large piece, and I cut down this corner of it. And this was when I did a session of printing onto these Japanese papers, handmade papers that I'd had for ages waiting for something to do with them. Then decided to have a session. I'll link that video. And I used feverfew, and you can see that this is the sort of first print. So when you print with any sort of, well, anything really, the first print you get a void. If you can then put the paper back when you put another layer on, and you get the detail in it. But I thought there was just something very simple and rather lovely about just the voided shape on this one. So I like those 2 pages a lot. This was similar. So this is another print. Well, actually that's the other side of it, because I think I used both sides when I often use, sometimes I don't want the first pass of a print when I'm jelly printing, so I'll do that onto pieces of paper, and I use both sides of it, so that's quite good for book use, of course. And then this was using the thermofax screen again, and yes, on the back of another one that has the voided shape. And then I put these double pages of maps in. I have a lot of maps because my lovely friend Camilla gave me lots that she had to spare, and they're just such nice sort of graphic things in their own right, and there were so many of them that I felt I could use them for art, without sort of worrying about it. And so I made sort of double page, actually sort of triple on that side. Then I did some mark making, and then this idea of sort of seeing through, I used this print that was done onto, I think, calligraphy paper or tissue paper. I think that's tissue paper actually, and glued that down, and I just quite like the way it becomes apparent when you open the sides. And so it's nice to have, if somebody else is looking, it's nice to have some sort of little hidden bits that you don't see at once, so it's like a little discovery. We'll wonder what's inside there. And then this half of the book obviously echoes the first half of the book because it's just the other side of the pieces of paper. So I've done similar things on this side. This, I've used another jelly print, as you can see, onto tissue paper, and this was using this slight sort of iridescent paint, so that gives a little bit of a different look to it. And then this is using, and I'm not sure this is entirely successful. I was talking about the cutting dies, and this was a bought one, and I just think it looks a bit too much like something I've bought, and it's not really very me. So I'm not sure I'd do that again. I mean, I like the fact that the shapes echo the silhouettes that I've used. It's just that little bit too scrapbooky for me, I think. But, it's fine. Not everything's going to work. There are the other pages of the snowdrops. And then this was another piece of tissue paper with prints on, again, from that Play-Doh session. And I did think, oh, shall I draw I might draw something in there because this is some of my nicer paper. But actually, again, I think it's quite nice to have some areas that don't have too much going on, so it doesn't look overworked. I like the fact that you can still read through this paper, weather phenomena, iridescent clouds. If I was being really literal, I could put an iridescent cloud on that side, but I think, although I did with the moon, I think I'll resist it in this case. And then this is another one of my preserved leaves, and again, that is surprising because that's quite a thick leathery one, but it has stuck down and bedded into the page pretty well. And this was a print that I actually made from that leaf before it got quite so disintegrated, so I like that juxtaposition there. And then that's the same half print of the one at the front, and then this was a photograph from a magazine, and I just really liked how the colours reflected that. And I have done a little bit of mark making with a pencil And I put, well, first of all, I actually put a layer of the matte medium because it was very glossy, because it was from a magazine and I didn't like that. So I painted onto it, and then I did this mark making, as you can see, if that shows on camera. And then these last 2 pages, that was a very old print of mine from a long time ago that I just printed through my home printer for my computer, and then I did a jelly print of a fennel silhouette on this side to echo that. And then this is very similar to the front page, so the same 2 prints. So that one's probably the most complete of all of them. So I made this book using a wire binding, and I explained that in the other video. And there are various different ways. If you can't get it done like that, you can use the individual ring binders. So there are lots of alternatives to that. And for this one, I didn't really have a theme as such. I just thought I'd try and use as much colour as possible and just kind of play with that. So this is I think I'd printed onto fabric, and then I'd put some paper. Yes, that's right. I think I'd painted some dye onto some muslin, and I put paper underneath. It was the fabric I was interested in at the time, but then the paper underneath got these lovely sort of effects. So I've always kept those and used them repeatedly. This I might do some more work in. I've again with the die cutter, I had one that made these sort of like an old filing system, and it's become a pocket. And this is so random. I don't know where this came from. I found in my sort of like small miscellaneous folder, I came across this 1 yen note and I just really liked how the colours went. So that's the reason that I've put that in there. I don't know if it will stay, it probably will. And I'm using a lot of bright colour, so pages I used, I've used them bright to begin with, or I've added colour, and I glued this tissue paper on because I liked that it had these orange bits that echoed the orange round it, and I just put a bit of blue wash on that side to echo the blue. That again is another one of my pieces from when I've been printing. And this is quite a detailed print of, now what plant was that? I think maybe that was the feverfew, I can't quite remember. But the colours, I like the way the colours echo with that one. This one, because it had weather phenomena, I'm not sure this has worked completely. I had the idea, it was talking all about clouds, so I thought I'd put these sort of lacy bits of tissue paper and these bits of printed paper to kind of look a bit like those very sort of long stretched out clouds. And then I just put some shapes on the other side to echo that. And 2 different sort of prints. So it's like this negative and positive shape. So when you do your first print with, in this case, some flower heads from reeds, the first time you go through, you get just the silhouette, and then the second time you get the detail. And I like how those look together. And then this is just this. I had some music paper that I added, and then I had already had these flowers that I'd printed out on tissue paper, and I like that you can still see the notes through that. So then I thought I'd do a little bit of sketching on that side. I was a bit disappointed because this is good watercolour paper, but I don't know whether it's somehow sticking that on the back. It kind of really affected how it felt, and it wasn't as pleasant to paint on as I'd hoped. But I just went round in my garden and I found some flowers. I've still got quite a lot of flowers at the moment, and I picked out some colours that I liked. I could go in and do a little bit more work on that, but at the same time I quite like the sketchiness of that. It's quite fun when you're doing flower painting to try and match the colours. And this is kind of mixed media really. So I used watercolour for the background, and then I used more of the Inktense crayons to add some of the detail. If the paint's just a little bit wet still, the crayons will start to just sort of bleed a little bit, and you can just get some really nice mark making. So I'm not worried that that isn't perfect. That's some more tissue paper layered up. And it's also quite fun to have different sized pieces of paper in it as well, just to add a bit of interest. And this was the print I already had. I think it was just the dark brown and then white, so I did a sort of graduated wash over it, and then I used that stencil that I showed you earlier. I had a slight, it didn't work out that well because the sponge that I was using, I thought it was completely dry from the last time I'd used it, you know, and washed it, but there was still a little bit of moisture, which is why it's bled a bit. I could go in there and sharpen up the edges with a gold pen. I might do, it's quite fun doing that sort of thing. And then here I had this piece already, and so I used another one of my printouts of an alien because I like the way the purple echoed that. And then this was a sort of chunky bit of watercolour paper, so I thought, oh, I'll put some watercolour down. These are sort of watercolours, they're quite sort of pigmenty dye, but they work in the same way as watercolours. And I thought it'd just be quite fun to do a sort of, it would actually be quite practical. I went through all the different, so I think there's 6 in each one, and I went round in order. So when you look at them in the pan, you think, oh, what does that colour come out? But now I know that one's the orange, so that one is an orangey red. I can work out exactly what the colours are. So it's actually quite a practical thing. And then I did the same thing on that side with the blues and the greens. And then I thought, oh, it'd be quite fun to actually sort of echo that with a bit of collage. So I found lots of papers that almost kind of recreated the same colours and went in the same sequence on that side. So that was quite a fun exercise to do. And then this, because I had this bit of map in here, I thought I would use another one of my thermofax. I did that in another, I made this little map, used one of these maps to make a little book. There might be a short on that. If there is, I'll add it to the playlist. And I just liked the fact that those sort of lines looked a bit like the meandering of the rivers on this map. So I did one that side and I did one that side. I did fold this up in a sort of concertina way at one point and then decided against it because it made the other pages not lie flat. But then it created lots of nice creases. So I put a very sort of washy paint on that side, and I actually really like the effect of that. So I'm glad I did the concertina, even though I decided against it in the end. And that's just a fairly plain one. I think I just added a little bit of green to echo that side. This is a print that didn't really work out because it had lots of gaps in it, but I liked the colour. And this was another one of my luminous leaf. I think this is from a video called Luminous Lacy Leaves, which is a bit of a mouthful. Well, I used very, very thin layers of paint, and this, as you can see, this one got a bit of paint on. I could do something about that, but I don't really mind. And the background of this is, this background's quite interesting because I have this roll of paper whenever I'm doing a session. I clean my roller off in between prints, and you often finish up with really interesting colour combinations. So I used that for a page. That was a print of a fig that came out a bit too dark and blocky. This was a sketch, and I've just sort of gone over that. I think I was painting some irises. This was from a printing session, and then I added this piece of, this again was from the Play-Doh session, and I've added that just because the colour matches. And then these are 2 more from other sessions onto tissue paper. And I mean, that didn't actually have the pink on, it was just blue and white, but I went over with a slight pinky wash of the watercolour, so it echoed that side of it. And then this is another one of the leaf prints that I put on that side. I'm not totally happy with that. I might fill that in with something else. It's a bit stark like that, but that's fine for now. And then this was cut off from another session of jelly printing. And then I tried to recreate that there I used white marble first and this was where I didn't let it dry first. And it kind of shows because although that red did match that colour, some of the white bled into it, but I quite like the effect of that. And then this is another You can see with this one that it got used several times when I was printing. It wasn't a deliberate, oh, I'm going to recreate this. I probably used that as my first, when I'm doing a print and I don't want to keep the first one, but I want to get the paint, surrounding paint off. As I say, I often use a piece of paper repeatedly on both sides. And again, you can get some interesting colour combinations. This is another one of the plant prints onto tissue paper. And then this was from the session that I did, the fennel and the feverfew, I think. And this is from a magazine transfer. That's a really fun thing you can do with jelly plates. I'm going to do a video about that at some point. So I'm a mixture of magazine transfers and stamping onto the plate. That was done with stamps. That was done with this little stamp there. And then you can take it all onto one piece of paper. And I like the colours of that and how that worked with that. And then this last page, that was from, do you know, that was from dried and pressed tulips, which worked for a bit, but the plants didn't keep going. They got very kind of, they were sort of too fleshy to dry out properly. So I got a few prints with them, but I'm going to do that again next spring. And again, I liked how these colours work together. And then the back is another print going back. And there's actually a link with the other book because this was one that I've done with the circles. So that's that one. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing how I'm doing my books, and I'd love to know if you've made one or maybe all three of these books. I think particularly the ones with the old covers are really fun because you can just make something very personal as a present or something for yourself. And if you've done any work in them, if you tag me on Instagram, I think there's going to be a change in YouTube so that the community tab, other people are going to be able to post things, not just the channel, not just me on my channel, but other people will be able to contribute. So that would be great when that comes in, so you could sort of upload your photographs. And I hope you'll join me again soon. Oh, and check out, I've got a playlist as well that I'll put at the end, which has got some of the other books that I've made in other videos. So see you back here soon.